Hello, Jared.
Hi, Alicia.
And welcome, listeners, to another deep dive from Vibrations and Manifestations.
Great to be back. Okay, so picture this. You've just finished an absolutely grueling Tuesday at work.
Oh, man, Tuesday is always the hardest day, too.
It really is. So you are exhausted, and you're standing in the middle of aisle 4 at your local grocery store.
Right in the danger zone.
Exactly. You're staring at this massive wall of olive oil. Or maybe you've wandered over to the produce section.
Which is high stakes when you're tired.
It's so high stakes because you're standing there holding a bunch of organic kale in one hand, and in the other hand, you have a bag of deeply processed neon-colored snacks.
The classic dilemma.
And suddenly you are just completely, utterly paralyzed.
Like your brain just short circuits.
Yes. You literally cannot make a decision.
Yeah.
Because you aren't just trying to buy groceries for the week anymore. You are standing there agonizing because you are trying to purchase the perfect combination of food that represent the exact person you want to be this week.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that hits deep.
Right. You ask yourself, am I the disciplined, healthy meal prep person? Or am I the relaxed, spontaneous person?
And if you buy the cookies, you feel like you failed your entire fitness identity.
Exactly. But if you buy the kale, you feel like you're just lying to yourself. Because you know it's probably just going to wilt into this tragic green puddle in the crisper drawer anyway.
It is so exhausting.
It is. And what I really want to explore today is why a simple grocery list can suddenly feel like an existential crisis.
Well, what's really fascinating here is the underlying choice architecture of that exact moment.
Let's unpack that.
So that micro-level decision fatigue, that absolute paralysis in the middle of aisle 4, it's actually a symptom of a much larger macro-level cultural pressure.
It's not really about the kale.
It is never about the kale. It is about this overwhelming, crushing pressure to finalize your identity.
Oh, to finalize it.
Yes. Think about it. If we are stressing out over finalizing a simple list of meals for the next 5 days because we want it to perfectly reflect who we are, it's no wonder that we feel completely crushed by the expectation to permanently figure out our careers.
Or our core beliefs.
Exactly. Or our personalities, our relationships. We operate under this immense sociological weight that demands we present a cohesive, completely unchangeable self to the world.
But wait, let me push back on that a little bit, because isn't that pressure somewhat necessary?
How do you mean?
Well, we are told from a very young age that life is essentially a multiple choice test, right?
Yeah.
You evaluate the options, and eventually you have to pick C, lock it in, and hand in the paper.
The final answer.
Right. So if we don't have that pressure to finalize our identity, don't we just become flaky? Like, how do we differentiate between committing to a path and just aimlessly drifting because we refuse to figure out who we are?
That is the exact tension we need to navigate today, because there's a profound difference between committing to a set of values or a process and committing to a rigid, finalized version of your ego.
Okay, that makes sense.
The multiple choice test analogy is exactly what we are dismantling in this deep dive, because life inherently introduces new variables. Constantly.
You meet new people, you travel.
You experience profound loss, you encounter new philosophies, and every single one of those experiences shifts your perspective. In psychology, there's this concept known as the end of history illusion.
Oh, I love this concept.
It's so revealing. It's this cognitive bias where individuals acknowledge that they have experienced significant personal growth and changes in their tastes up to the present moment.
Right, like we look back at who we were 5 years ago and cringe.
Exactly. But the illusion is that we falsely believe we will not substantially grow or mature in the future. We look at our current selves today and think, yes, I have finally arrived.
We think we are the finished product, like the software has officially shipped.
We really do. But to expect a human being to lock in a finalized identity at age 20 or 30 or even 50 is to just completely deny the fundamental biological and psychological reality that life is designed to change us.
And that brings us to the core mission of our deep dive today. We are borrowing a framework directly from software development, and we are applying it to human psychology.
The concept of living in beta.
Living in beta. We are going to explore why adopting the mindset of a beta test, where you are out in the real world, you're functioning, but you explicitly acknowledge that you are an ongoing, evolving, slightly glitchy experiment, is the ultimate antidote to the perfectionism that paralyzes you in the grocery aisle.
So we're looking at the history of technology, the hard science of neuroplasticity, and modern psychology to basically ask, What if human identity isn't a fixed destination?
Right. And I think the best way to start is to look at this through the lens of early internet development.
Oh, take us back to the 90s.
I will, because we easily accept that an app or a platform is going to launch with bugs and get patched over time.
But we flat out refuse to give our own ego that same grace period.
Exactly. So let's rewind to the 1990s web. And we aren't going to do a whole history lesson on how dial-up works.
Though the sound is burned into my brain.
That screeching symphony of the modem. If you were there, you remember it. And if you weren't, you've heard the horror stories of waiting 3 entire minutes for a single image to load.
Horizontally. Line by line.
Yes. Line by painfully slow line. And then someone picks up the phone in the other room, your connection drops.
Devastating.
But what I really want to focus on here is the ethos of that early internet. It was chaotic. The formatting was broken half the time.
It was the Wild West.
It really was. And everywhere you looked, on almost every single personal web page or new software program, there was this little spinning GIF,
The little construction worker.
the construction worker, with a bright yellow banner that proudly stated, under construction, or currently in beta.
Which raises a really crucial analytical point about how things grow.
Go ahead.
Why did that messy, glitchy, incredibly frustrating early internet actually succeed and become the foundation of our entire modern society? Why didn't it just collapse under the weight of its own imperfection?
Because it wasn't trying to be perfect.
Exactly. It wasn't because the developers waited for it to be flawless. If they had waited in a spiral lab until they had modern fiber optic speeds and perfect user interfaces, the internet would have never launched.
We'd still be waiting for it.
We would. It succeeded exactly because they let it be messy in public. The power of the early internet was the power of real-time iteration. The system learned through feedback.
People used it. The infrastructure broke under the load.
Developers saw exactly where it broke, and they patched it for the next version.
They didn't view a broken link as a moral failure of the developer. It was just a data point.
Precisely. It was just data. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of modern technology, this iterative process hasn't stopped. It has actually become the gold standard for the most complex systems humanity has ever built.
Like artificial intelligence.
Yes. Look at how modern AI systems are developed. If we look at large language models, the AI that is basically dominating the cultural conversation right now, they are not programmed with fixed, immutable, hard-coded rules like a calculator.
Right, let's really unpack that because the mechanics of how AI learns are incredibly relevant to how we form habits and identities.
So when an AI model is in training, it uses something called backpropagation.
Which sounds intimidating, but the concept is brilliant.
It really is. The model is given a prompt, it makes a prediction, and inevitably, especially early on in its training, it gets it wrong.
It makes an error.
It makes a huge error. But the system doesn't shut down and declare itself a failure. It calculates the loss, which is the mathematical difference between its prediction and the correct answer.
Right.
And it propagates that error backward through its neural network, slightly adjusting the mathematical weights and biases of billions of parameters.
It literally updates its own internal code based on the mistake.
Exactly. It requires massive amounts of data, which is essentially the lived experience of the AI. And it needs constant interaction to learn where it is biased, where it hallucinates, and where it can improve. It never claims to be finished.
Well, wait, let me challenge that comparison for a second. Because AI doesn't have an ego.
That is very true.
It doesn't feel shame when its loss function is high. But humans have massive emotional stakes tied to our errors.
Oh, absolutely.
If I make a mistake at my job, or if I realize a belief I've held fiercely for 10 years is totally wrong, I don't just objectively adjust my weights and biases mathematically.
No, you feel a pit in your stomach.
I feel like my world is collapsing. We demand that we have our entire identity perfectly coded and bug-free from the start because the social consequences of being wrong feel lethal to us.
That is exactly the friction point, and it's why this deep dive is so vital. You are entirely correct that the human ego violently resists backpropagation.
We hate being wrong.
We treat our own personal development with a rigidity that we wouldn't dare apply to a billion-dollar computer program.
That's such a wild double standard when you think about it.
It is. We expect AI, quantum computers, global networks to evolve in beta, yet we demand psychological perfection from a messy biological organism.
Right.
And that rigidity, driven by the ego's fear of social shame, creates an enormous amount of suffering. When we operate under the illusion of a final version of ourselves, we fall into 3 very predictable, deeply damaging psychological traps.
Let's get into those traps, because recognizing the architecture of the trap is the first step to dismantling it.
Let's do it.
So, trap number one is identity rigidity. This is the phenomenon where your loyalty to your past self overrides your present reality.
It's that feeling of being locked in.
Yes. It sounds like a definitive statement.
Hmm.
I already decided who I am.
Hmm.
Let's say you decided at 22 that you are a hardcore corporate ladder climber.
Yeah.
You built your wardrobe around it, your friend group around it, your entire vocabulary around it.
You're all in.
But then at 35, you wake up and realize you are deeply miserable, and all you really want to do is open a quiet bakery in the suburbs.
I think a lot of people have that exact fantasy.
They really do. But identity rigidity makes that desire feel like an existential crisis instead of a simple pivot. You feel like you are betraying yourself.
And society rewards that rigidity, which makes it worse.
How so?
We praise people who, quote-unquote, stick to their guns. We label politicians who update their policies based on new data as flip-floppers.
Oh, totally. Changing your mind is seen as a weakness.
Exactly. So internally, when you feel the desire to change your career from corporate to baking, your brain triggers an alarm. It interprets the death of your old identity as an actual physical threat.
Which leads directly into trap number two, perfection pressure.
Yes, the heavy one.
Because you believe your identity must be a finalized product, you develop this paralyzing belief that you must have absolutely everything figured out before taking a single step in a new direction.
The metabolic cost of that perfectionism is staggering.
It really is. Perfection pressure demands a guarantee that simply does not exist in the dynamic universe.
Right.
It tells you that you cannot start a new relationship or change your career or even just take up a new hobby unless you are entirely certain of the outcome and your permanent lifelong commitment to it.
It views any misstep not as an AI gathering data, but as a catastrophic failure of your character.
Which perfectly sets up trap number three, fear of contradiction.
This is perhaps the most socially driven trap of all.
It's the profound worry that changing your mind or shifting your priorities makes you look hypocritical to your tribe.
Because we are deeply tribal animals.
We are. We are terrified of someone looking at us and saying, wait, but last year you said you believed this. Or, but you're the healthy person, why are you eating that?
We hold on to outdated versions of ourselves purely as a performance for an audience.
Yes.
We basically become curators of a museum of our past selves, terrified that someone will notice the exhibits don't match anymore.
Curators of a museum of our past selves. That is a brilliant way to frame it.
It's a heavy job.
It's exhausting. And what's wild is how entirely unnatural that rigidity is when you look at the hard science.
The biology tells a completely different story.
It really does. The biological reality is that our brains are literally built to remain in beta. Let's look at neuroplasticity for a second, but let's go deeper than just using it as a buzzword.
Right, let's get into the mechanics.
The fundamental mechanism of your brain relies on synaptic pruning and Hebbian theory.
Right, the old adage in neuroscience is neurons that fire together wire together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every single time you have a new experience, learn a new fact, or face a new challenge, your neural pathways structurally adjust.
They physically change shape.
Yes. But equally important is the synaptic pruning. Your brain contains these microglia cells that literally act as the brain's immune system,
Seeking out the unused connections.
seeking them out and pruning them away to conserve metabolic energy. Your brain is a highly efficient, constantly remodeling organic machine. You are structurally, physically not the same person you were yesterday.
And resisting that biological mandate physically hurts us.
It really does.
When you force a rigid identity against the reality of a changing environment, you experience cognitive dissonance. And that triggers actual stress responses. Cortisol floods your system, your heart rate elevates.
Changing your mind feels physically uncomfortable because your brain is expending extra metabolic energy to forge new neural pathways while simultaneously resisting those deeply rutted old ones.
I know you have a really powerful personal example of this.
I do. I experienced this somatic resistance firsthand recently with my own habits.
I'd love to hear how that manifested for you.
Well, I've always been someone who prided myself on an intense, almost punishing discipline when it comes to my fitness routine.
You've always been very structured.
Highly structured. My locked-in code was, I am the guy who does the grueling 5 a.m. workout no matter what.
Rain or shine.
Exactly. And that wasn't just a habit for me. It was my identity. But recently, my schedule dramatically changed. My stress level spiked, and my body was just completely fundamentally exhausted.
The environment changed.
The variables shifted. Yet I kept trying to force the 5 a.m. workout because that was who I was. I would wake up, feel physically ill, fail the workout, and then spend the rest of the day just berating myself.
You were trapped in identity rigidity.
Deeply trapped. It wasn't until I allowed myself to view my life as an iteration, to actually step back and say, okay, that 5 a.m. routine was version 1.0. The environment has changed. What does version 2.0 look like?
And what happened when you did that?
The cortisol levels instantly dropped. I shifted to a 20-minute evening walk and some light stretching.
Which is a huge shift from a grueling morning workout.
It felt like I was losing my identity at first, which was that metabolic resistance we talked about. But really, I was just updating my choices to match my current reality. It was backpropagation.
You were calculating the loss and updating the weights.
Yes, it was an iteration, not a failure.
That is a perfect example of neuroplasticity in action at the behavioral level.
Thank you.
You took in new data, your fatigue, the environmental shift of your schedule, and instead of treating the failure to wake up as a character flaw, you adjusted the weights and biases of your routine.
I let it be messy.
You did. And what's fascinating here is that this isn't just a scientific reality. It mirrors deeply rooted spiritual philosophies as well.
Oh, I know you love this intersection.
It's my favorite part. Thinkers like Alan Watts and Eckhart Tolle point out that the central illusion of the ego is that it believes it is a static object.
Yes. Watts talks about how we define ourselves as nouns when we are actually verbs.
We aren't a human, we are humaning.
Humaning. I love that. Life is an unfolding process of becoming.
Exactly. Spiritual growth is about present awareness. It's not about racing toward a static destination of ultimate certainty. And I experienced a very similar profound shift recently in my own life.
Tell me about that.
So I've been taking some advanced coursework recently, and for the longest time, my identity was entirely wrapped up in being the perfect student.
The one with all the right answers?
Exactly, the one who had every single answer mapped out, who knew exactly what the degree was going to be used for in a highly specific career track.
You had the 5-year plan?
I had the 10-year plan. I was demanding absolute certainty for my future, but as I got deeper into the material, my intellectual interests completely shifted.
The new data came in.
The new data came in, and suddenly the rigid path I was on didn't feel authentic anymore. Concurrently, I've been navigating the dating world, and my approach there was equally rigid.
Oh, dating with a rigid identity is tough.
It's impossible. I had this finalized checklist of what a partner, quote-unquote, must be. I was essentially demanding a finished product from another human being.
Right, looking for their final version instead of their beta.
Exactly. But the more actual complex humans I met, the more that checklist just completely fell apart.
It didn't hold up to reality.
Not at all. In both my coursework and my dating life, the lesson was identical. My evolution required flexibility. I had to let go of the finalized syllabus and the finalized checklist.
Because a rigid system shatters under pressure.
Yes. Science and spirit completely agree on this. A rigid system shatters, but a flexible system evolves through the pressure.
Okay, so we've established the philosophical grounding. We have the AI comparisons, the neuroscience, the traps. We really understand why we need to live in beta.
But how do we actually execute this?
Exactly. How do we stop white-knuckling our identities when our brains are so biologically wired for the safety of certainty? We need to get into the practical tools.
The most immediate and powerful place to intervene is at the level of your vocabulary.
Language is everything.
It really is. We have to look at linguistic determinism, which is the idea that the language you use actually shapes your cognitive processes. The danger of fixed statements is profound.
Because the casual language we use quietly and often subconsciously locks our identity into place.
Think about the things you say about yourself without even thinking.
I'm bad at networking.
I'm just not a disciplined person.
I'm terrible with money.
I have a short temper.
Right. When we use those definitive I am statements, we are taking a temporary state of being or a current lack of skill, and we are cementing it into a permanent character trait.
You are basically typing into your brain's terminal. This is the final release of this software. Do not attempt to update.
That is such a dangerous command to run.
Which is why we need to introduce the version language tool.
Let's break this tool down.
This is a highly practical linguistic shift designed to bypass your ego's defense mechanisms. It gives your nervous system room to breathe.
How does it work?
The moment you catch yourself making a rigid identity statement, you intervene. You swap the definitive language for exploration language.
Give me an example.
Instead of saying, I am bad at this, you shift to, I am currently exploring. or I am experimenting with.
Okay, let me give you an ultra-simple, real-world example of this that you can literally use by the end of today, even if you have never read a self-development book in your life.
I love this one.
Let's say you really struggle with waking up when your alarm goes off. The old, rigid identity statement is declaring, I'm just not a morning person. Boom, door closed.
You finalize the identity.
You've locked it in. But if you run the beta update on that language, you change it to the count. I am currently experimenting with new ways to build a supportive morning routine.
Do you feel the difference in the psychological weight there?
It's massive.
Yeah.
That tiny shift turns a closed door into an open invitation for curiosity.
Yeah.
It maps perfectly to our AI analogy. You aren't failing at being a morning person. You are just a system running a low-stakes experiment to gather data.
It immediately lowers the stakes. You are gathering data on what happens when you set your alarm across the room, or what happens if you read a book instead of scrolling on your phone before bed.
It's just an experiment.
Exactly. And to really ground this concept, I want to take us through a powerful analytical metaphor right now.
Let's do it.
We talked earlier about how we often act as curators of a museum of our past selves. Let's really unpack the framing of a museum versus the framing of a workshop.
I love this framing because it directly addresses the cortisol response we talked about earlier.
Right. If it's safe to do so, I want you to just close your eyes for a second.
If you aren't driving, obviously.
Obviously. But just imagine the psychological environment of a high-end art museum. The works on the wall are finished masterpieces. They are framed in heavy gold, illuminated by perfect spotlights.
It's very quiet, very sterile.
Very sterile. And what is the primary rule of a museum?
Do not touch.
Do not touch. If you walk up to a painting in a museum and try to add a brush stroke, security guards will literally tackle you.
It's a highly defensive environment.
The environment is high stakes and rigid. When you view your identity as a museum exhibit, your ego acts as the security guard.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Any feedback, any change in environment, any suggestion that you might need to adapt is treated as an attack on a priceless masterpiece. Your cortisol spikes. You become defensive.
Because if the art isn't perfect, it shouldn't be on the wall.
Right. Now, I want you to imagine opening a heavy wooden door and walking out of that museum and into a workshop.
The air feels different immediately.
It does. A master craftsman's workshop is a warm, sunlit, creative space. It's messy, it smells like sawdust and oil.
There are blueprints spread across long wooden tables.
Half-finished projects, tools scattered everywhere, nothing is rushed, and nothing is judged.
It's a space of pure development.
Exactly. When someone walks into a workshop and points out a flaw in a prototype, the craftsman doesn't call security.
They don't get defensive.
No. They pick up a tool and say, good catch, let's adjust the angle. There is no expectation of finality on the workbench.
So by adopting version language,
Yeah.
by labeling your current struggles as version in progress, you are consciously moving your identity out of the high-anxiety museum and into the low-anxiety workshop.
You imagine placing a literal label on whatever part of your life you're struggling with right now, a relationship, a career, a trait. And the label simply reads, version in progress. Not broken, not behind, just evolving.
That is such a vital distinction. Version in progress. It removes all the moral weight we usually attach to our mistakes. It turns a character flaw into a workable data point.
It's so freeing.
It is. But as beautiful as that workshop metaphor is, we have to talk about the internal resistance.
The pushback.
Because we can sit here and talk about living in beta and gathering data all day long, but when we step back into our actual day-to-day lives, our internal programming often fiercely resists this kind of change.
This is exactly why we need to enter into what we can call manifestation debug mode.
Debug mode. Let's run the diagnostics.
We have to look at the subconscious code that is currently running the operating system of your mind.
Because consciously, logically, you might listen to this and say, yes, I want to evolve. I want to be in the workshop.
But subconsciously, there's an old line of code that is throwing up fatal error messages every single time you try to change a deeply held belief.
So how do we actually spot that bad code? What of diagnostics?
You find it in the somatic markers in your body.
The physical sensations.
Exactly. I want you to think about a time recently when you considered outgrowing a relationship, or quitting a career path you had been on for a decade, or changing a political or philosophical belief you were known for.
Just thinking about that makes me tense up.
Right. Notice the physical tension that arises when you just entertain the thought. For some, it's a tight, restrictive feeling in the center of the chest.
For others, it's a heavy knot in the stomach or a sudden shallowing of the breath.
That physical tension is the alarm bell of your old code firing.
And for most of us, the core logic of that old code sounds exactly like this. If I change direction now, it means I was wrong before.
And if I was wrong, I am a failure.
Oh, that is the heaviest code of all. The sunk cost fallacy applied to the human soul.
It really is.
If I change, I was wrong. It implies that all the time you spent in your previous career, or the years you invested in a relationship that is no longer working, or the energy you spent holding your previous worldview was just a total embarrassing waste.
Which is why we stay in miserable situations. We don't want to admit to the world that version 1.0 wasn't the final answer.
But we have to rewrite this narrative. And we do it by returning to our technological baseline.
Let's do the update.
When a software developer releases version 2.0 of an application, they aren't crying over version 1.0 being a failure.
Not at all.
They don't view the initial release as a waste of time. Version 1.0 was absolutely necessary to gather the real-world data required to build version 2.0.
Iteration isn't failure.
Iteration is intelligence. The system is working exactly as it should. Your past beliefs, your past relationships, your past careers, they were the version 1.0 that gathered the data you needed to realize what version 2.0 requires.
So let's install that new code right now. We are actively uninstalling the belief that change equals failure.
The new internal code is simple, but it requires daily practice.
It goes like this. I allow myself to evolve.
I allow myself to evolve. That is powerful.
And if we want to push that to the brave next level, the ultimate courage in a society that demands finalized identities is to take that code one step further.
What's the advanced code?
The advanced code is, I allow myself to evolve publicly.
Oh, evolving publicly. That is where the real friction lies. That triggers trap number 3, the fear of contradiction.
It is terrifying because it makes you vulnerable to the tribe. You are letting people see the messy workshop.
But when you finally grant yourself the permission to evolve openly, where other people can actually see your messy iterative process, you remove an immense psychological burden.
You no longer have to carry the exhausting weight of performing a static identity.
You don't have to pretend you have it all figured out. You can say to a friend or a colleague or a partner, you know what, I used to think X was the right path for me, but I've been learning, gathering new data, and now I'm exploring Y.
It is the most liberating thing you can do for your nervous system. It invites other people into your workshop instead of locking them out of your museum.
Okay, so we've updated the code, we've moved from the museum to the workshop, and we've embraced public iteration. How do we practically audit our lives for this?
We need to figure out where to apply it first.
Right. We aren't going to just give you a listicle of questions to read through. Let's discuss how to diagnose where you need this beta mindset the most right now. How do we spot the areas in our lives that are crying out for a software update?
A great diagnostic is to look for where you are actively demanding certainty. I'll throw this back to you. When you look at your own life or the lives of the people we work with, where does that demand for certainty usually hide?
It almost always hides in our timelines.
Oh, the timelines.
We demand certainty in our 5-year career plans, or the exact timeline of when a relationship needs to hit a specific milestone. If you are beating yourself up because you don't have your entire life mapped out with guaranteed outcomes by age 30, that is the demand for certainty.
That's a prime target for the beta mindset.
Exactly.
Once you locate that demand for certainty, the next diagnostic step is to look for opportunities for low-stakes experiments.
Notice the emphasis on low stakes.
Very important. If you realize your career identity is too rigid, living in beta doesn't mean you immediately quit your job, sell your house, and move to the woods.
That's a high-stakes, dramatic shift that will trigger massive cortisol spikes.
It will shut your system down. A low-stakes experiment is much smaller. If you've been demanding certainty that you are meant to be an artist, a low-stakes experiment is buying a cheap set of watercolors and playing for 10 minutes on a Tuesday without showing anyone.
You were just running a test script. And while you are running those tests, you have to constantly audit your internal software for outdated identity stories. We all carry around legacy code.
So much legacy code.
Are you still telling yourself you were bad at technology just because you struggled to set up a router in 2012?
Or are you still carrying around the identity of the shy kid from high school, even though you are 35, manage a team of 20 people, and are perfectly capable of speaking your mind?
We have to locate the outdated software and realize It no longer serves the current hardware.
Which brings us to the ultimate question you can ask yourself daily.
Let's hear it.
If you treated your life like a beta project today, if the pressure to be a perfect finished product was completely removed, and failure was simply recoded as gathering data for the next version, what is the very next thing you would try?
Not next year.
Not when you have it all figured out, but today.
That reframing changes everything. It changes how you approach a difficult conversation, a project at work, or even just your evening routine.
It really does.
These questions are specifically designed to disrupt the rigid neural pathways we've been relying on. They force the brain out of the black and white safety zone and into the realm of possibility.
We actually have a visualization exercise here that I found really powerful when preparing for this episode. It's a way to anchor this cognitive shift physically.
I love visualizations for this kind of work. If you are driving, obviously keep your eyes open. But if you can, just soften your gaze, maybe close your eyes.
Just let your body settle for a moment.
You don't have to force anything.
Yeah.
Just drop your shoulders away from your ears. Unclench your jaw.
Take one slow breath in and let it all the way out. So picture a workshop. Imagine you are walking down a quiet hallway and you come to a heavy, handcrafted wooden door. You push it open and step into a warm, sunlit, incredibly quiet, creative workshop. It smells faintly of cedar, and there's dust dancing in the sunlight.
And the reason we use the imagery of a workshop with large wooden work tables spaced evenly apart is to give a physical representation of our cognitive load. On these tables are various unfinished projects. Some are blueprints, some are half-carved wood. These tables represent the different facets of your life. One table holds your primary relationship, another holds your career, another holds your physical health, and another holds your very sense of identity.
And what I love about this visualization is the emotional resonance of the room. When you picture this space, there is absolutely no rush. There are no ticking clocks on the wall. There is no boss or judge standing over your shoulder with a red pen grading your progress.
Because in this space, you pick up a tool, not for tearing things down or for forcing pieces together with brute strength, but a fine tool made for gentle refining. For making minute, careful adjustments based on feedback. And the most important part of this imagery is the label. You pick up a small, beautifully handwritten label and you place it gently next to the project of your identity. The label reads, "Version in progress."
It is a profound declaration of freedom. It acknowledges that the work is happening, but it removes the artificial, suffocating deadline of completion. It honors the iterative nature of your existence. You are the designer in this workshop.
You really are.
You are allowed to adjust. You're allowed to step back, look at the project, say, this isn't working, and change its direction entirely. You are not behind schedule. You are not failing. You are simply beautifully in development.
It is a remarkable paradigm shift when that finally clicks. The anxiety of having to present a final version to the world just evaporates.
It really does. And when you're ready, just bring your attention back to the room you're in, the sounds around you, the chair beneath you, and just take a regular breath. So let's recap the immense journey we've taken on this deep dive today. We started by confronting the suffocating cultural pressure to establish a final identity. We looked at how our brains trick us into the traps of identity rigidity, perfectionism, and the paralyzing fear of looking inconsistent or hypocritical to others.
Right. And then we took that trip back in time using the glorious, glitchy metaphor of the early dial-up internet and connected it to the ongoing development of modern AI and quantum computing. We saw that the most powerful, complex systems on Earth are, by design, always in beta.
We then grounded that technological metaphor in the biological reality of neuroplasticity. We looked at how our brains are literally built for continuous iterative updates through feedback loops.
And finally, we translated that science into practical application. We introduced version language, shifting our words from fixed permanent states to exploratory processes, and we ran the manifestation debug mode, where we manually rewrote the internal code from change equals failure to I allow myself to evolve publicly. And looking back on this whole conversation, I'm sitting here trying to think of how I would even summarize my own identity right now if someone put a microphone in my face and forced me to give them one single final definitive sentence.
Oh, good luck with that.
I know, right?
Ugh.
I'd probably stumble through something like, I am a deeply curious person who loves synthesizing information, but also sometimes I'm terribly impatient when I'm driving, and I'm very dedicated to my health, except when I'm emotionally exhausted and then I eat the neon snacks.
It's completely impossible.
It's totally impossible. It feels
Mhm.
like I'm trying to cram an entire ocean into a thimble. It's so restrictive and honestly a little ridiculous.
And that is exactly why it is so crucial to let go of the thimble.
Yeah?
You don't need the final sentence. You don't need the museum placard. When someone asks for your final definition, you can just tell them you are currently in beta.
Currently in beta. I love it. I have to say, dropping the heavy armor of having to be certain all the time, realizing I can just gather data,
Yeah.
it leaves me feeling this deep, cautious optimism.
Cautious optimism. I like that phrasing.
It just feels incredibly light to know I don't have to have it all figured out by tomorrow morning. I can just run the experiment.
I completely agree. The lightness of that beta framing is profound, but I think your phrasing of cautious optimism is the perfect place to pause.
Why is that?
Because we have to be realistic here. Constant evolution does carry a risk. It requires metabolic and emotional energy to keep your systems open to continuous updating.
That's true. The brain uses energy for all that pruning.
Exactly. So, in our next deep dive, we are going to explore the other side of this coin. We'll be looking into initiation fatigue.
Oh, initiation fatigue.
Yes. How to navigate this constant state of beta change and how to integrate all these new versions of yourself without completely burning out your nervous system in the process.
Oh, that is going to be a crucial counterbalance. I can't wait to dive into the mechanics of that.
It's going to be a good one.
But until then, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over on your own as you go about your week.
Take this with you.
You've heard everything we've unpacked today about leaving behind the illusion of the final version. But what if the most authentic, genuine version of you isn't a destination you eventually arrive at, but simply your daily willingness to keep updating?
Think about that. We will catch you next time.